Hi, Cindy Blake here. I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Secure and Defend. And John Blevins has asked me to share with you how I would do a customer pitch for Secure and Defend or DevSecOps, if you will. And so I'm going to take a moment to show you a draft deck that I have. I've got it out there for comments and show you how I would pitch it. It's a little bit different than what we've been using for security overview. So love your feedback, and I think doing it on a video might be helpful to show you what I had in mind. I'm also going to show you with the notes so that you can see, I can point out some relevant items there. So this deck is intended for a security audience. You can use it with a DevOps or developer audience, but it's got some things in here that are intended for the security audience, because usually they're the ones that can be a roadblock if they aren't on board with using the secure features, and they may be funding the delta for Ultimate. The first thing that is really important, and you may not want to show this, but it's important for qualifying your audience, is to make sure that you're on the same page for what y'all want to talk about. So there's 4 elements to security when it comes to GitLab. One is the security testing, and that is what we call secure. There's also defend, which is protecting your applications in production. Think of that more as cloud application security. And then there's compliance, and people often confuse compliance with secure. Compliance is how it's under the manage stage in GitLab, but it's how we ensure that the right people have access to the code, so you don't have random people making changes to your code. So it has access control, things like multi-factor authentication, things like the same person that writes the code shouldn't be the same person that pushes it to production. All of those kinds of things are compliance. And you need to ask enough questions to find out what the concern is and what their primary pain is, because if it's compliance, this is not the presentation for you. Contact Matt Gonzalez, the PM, or Samya. She is the PMM that's working on compliance, and they can help you there. The last piece of this is how GitLab secures the GitLab application. And there you can go to security, not secure, not defend, but GitLab security. And that page that's Jonathan Hunt's group, kind of our CISO organization, if you will. And there's like questionnaires and things there. So just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page for what it is that we're talking about. That is actually a way that a lot of time gets lost in having the wrong conversations. Now, I'm going to go through this a little bit, how I would talk with a customer. Application security is difficult because it requires people, processes, and tools. It's not just like throwing a network security device on your network and doing a little tuning and you're ready to go. When vulnerabilities are found, usually by the security person, they can't do the remediation. So they have to work with the developers to do the remediation, to fix those flaws. So it takes a village, it takes collaboration, coordination, and that's what makes it so hard. Add to that, when you use a DevOps methodology, you've got smaller code changes, much more iterative. It really doesn't fit with doing a waterfall security process where you're doing the scanning at the end. There's new attack surfaces with containers and Kubernetes, and many more APIs between functions. And API security is kind of in its infancy, so there's not a lot of good solutions out there for that. Now, all of this results in unsatisfying trade-offs. You've got, risk of introducing new vulnerabilities, but you also have velocity and time to market. And all of those things kind of come together with bad trade-offs. So how do you balance those things? Now, use this slide to ask your customer or your prospect questions. Which of these things are the most painful to them? Turn this around, get some information from them, see where their head is in terms of what is the chief complaint, chief issue of building security into their DevOps. Now, the whole shift left mantra kind of comes from almost urban legend, right? So NIST did a study back in 2002, 2005, long time ago, that showed that it's 30 times more costly to fix flaws, security flaws in production than it is to fix them earlier in design. And so this is what the genesis is for the whole shift left, is wanting to reduce cost by finding and fixing vulnerabilities earlier. But how you do it is not an easy nut to crack. That's been around for a long time, and that's why we still don't have really good market penetration around application security. Not just GitLab, the market in general doesn't always do application security like they should. So ask them questions. What do you do when, if they're using Fortify or Veracode or one of the tools that's been around for a long time, what do you do when you find 10,000 vulnerabilities late in your software development lifecycle? It happens all the time. What if you could find those as you went by dealing with the scanning as code changes are made? What kind of improvement would that make in your workflow? And get them to think about that and articulate that. Super important. Have them also articulate what are their desired outcomes. So these are some that are common. Which of these are most important to your customer? Are they trying to do this for compliance reasons and audit reasons? So you can do scanning for compliance purposes. Scanning is a requirement oftentimes of compliance. But is that what's driving them? Have they had an audit and maybe they failed an audit and they know they've got to do better? Could be efficiencies. They realize that they need to shift left, finding things late in the game doesn't work for them. Maybe that's their biggest desire in terms of what they want to achieve. Could be reducing risk. Maybe they don't want to move vulnerabilities to production. They want to really, some people want to ratchet down and not progress development. In fact, I've had customers that said, I'd rather, rather not surface vulnerabilities early in the life cycle because I don't want the developers dealing with that. As a security person, I want to control it and I want to be on top of it. So be careful here, because the security people sometimes have a little bit different motivations. Sometimes it's job protection. So ask them questions, get them to put this in their words, or what is their desirable outcome. Now, oftentimes we see that one of the chief drivers is efficiency. And so you can think back to command of the message and pull some things from that efficiency side of the equation, and an efficiency value driver. If you put that through a security lens, there's efficiencies for both the developer and the security person. For the developer, it means dealing with things in their workflow, not having to change context and have somebody come back, a week later, a month later, what have you, and say, gosh, you've got this vulnerability that I need you to deal with. For the security person, it may mean a combination of maybe there's fewer vulnerabilities for them to deal with because the security person the developer was able to resolve them early on. But it could also mean for every less vulnerability that they have to worry about that hasn't been resolved, that's less time going through a whole workflow that they would have for triaging those vulnerabilities, validating them, triaging them back to the development team, finding out, did the development team assign somebody? Has it been fixed? You can imagine the time effort there. So I wouldn't show this, and this is an MVC slide. I promise I'll make it prettier. But I wouldn't show this to everybody, but if efficiency is important to them, it's certainly worth bringing up. By the way, this deck is meant for you to be customized. to customize it for the customer that you're talking to. Don't feel like you've got to use every slide. There's a lot in here, and it's really just meant to give you a boilerplate to pick from. Now, and I did try to align this more with command of the messaging. Required capabilities. You want the customer or the prospect to articulate that this is their set of required capabilities. Why? Because we meet them. But this is, if they will say, I have to have the scan results in the hands of the developer when they do a code commit, or at least when they do a merge, that's really key because we do that better than anybody. Other, traditional AppSec vendors are trying to partner with us because they know the importance of getting their scan results in front of the developer. We do that natively. So if you can get them to articulate these items, these required capabilities, that's going to be a driver, because then they're saying, these are the things that I need. And we're saying, well, here's how we do it. Now, we replace disjointed tools. That's true across the whole DevOps lifecycle, but it's also true within security. A lot of the tools grew through acquisition. And there's a lot of point solutions out there. So if they're using Sneak, for instance, Sneak does software composition analysis and license compliance, but it doesn't do SAST and DAST. If they're using Veracode, Fortify, the big ones, they are multifaceted, but they grew through acquisition. So they're going to try to sell you a separate dashboard to pull all of their scan results together into one place. SonarQube, they focus more on quality than on security, but they do a little bit of security as well. So, we can provide that end-to-end view, end-to-end scanning. In the security space, it's often referred to as defense in depth. You want to do multiple kinds of scans because each scan is going to find a different kind of vulnerability. And we do that very, very well. You can show them, I recommend that you show them that we embed our security scanners within CI. So that's really key there because it spares them from having to do that integration if they're using GitLab CI. By the way, if they're using Jenkins for CI, Fern does have a video out there where we've done kind of a proof of concept to show you can use somebody else's CI and still use GitLab for security scanning. Just like you can use somebody else's source code manager. However, my caveat would be, it's really best if you're using something from GitLab. If you're not using GitLab for SCM nor for CI, it probably doesn't make any sense to use us for secure. So that is why we are a niche player, by the way, in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So if somebody tries to say it's because our scanners are inferior, that is not the reason. I would turn that around and say, no, it's because we're a niche in the market in terms of we're the only end-to-end DevOps tool vendor on that Magic Quadrant. Now, with GitLab, here is our kind of value proposition. You can scan all your code every time that there's a code change, seamlessly for the developer, using fewer tools, not more, and you have a single source of truth, getting dev and sec in particular on the same page. Everybody's looking at the same thing. So you don't have the translation between a security system back to the developer and between the developer doing their thing and trying to convince the security person that it's been dealt with. Everybody's looking at the same thing, which, by the way, auditors love because of that transparency and that visibility end-to-end across the development lifecycle of who changed what, where, when, and why, including dismissing vulnerabilities and approving merge requests that may not meet policy. Fuzzing can be another piece of the conversation. It's not too early. We closed those acquisitions of Peach and Fuzzit in, I think, April, March. They have been integrated. And they will help you find vulnerabilities that you didn't know existed. It's a case of, I don't know what I don't know to ask for. It can find things that are logic flaws that are not known vulnerabilities that are identified with CVE and things that may also kind of be on the fringe between security and quality. And we have two types, coverage guided and protocol fuzzing. The protocol fuzzing is going to help you with APIs. And I think this is going to be a big boon for us when we can articulate some examples of where some customers have used our fuzzing capabilities to test their APIs. Now, I use this slide. If I only have 5 minutes and I only have one slide, this is the slide that I use. And here's the reason why. We run all of our application security testing on the feature branch. Why is that so important? It means clear accountability for the developer that made a change of code on that feature branch. They created that vulnerability. It wasn't somebody else. So you get very clear feedback of, I created this vulnerability. I'm the one best capable of fixing it. And while I'm right here working on it. That is really, really key. It's totally different than the other traditional application security vendors do, where they're testing maybe a whole repository, because then when you find vulnerabilities, you don't know who they belong to. This is also really important for somebody that's interested in improving the skills of the developer to create more secure code. What better way than to give immediate feedback of, you created this and it was has a vulnerability in it, which also, by the way, we're going to get to when we talk about defend, because that's going to provide feedback on exploits, actual exploits of their code. So a lot of people are interested in educating the developer to craft more secure code, and this is how we help. Now, this just kind of reinforces that we're embedding these scans in the CI pipeline, nothing that they need to do. They can turn it on in Auto DevOps very simply and customize it in the YAML file very easily as well. So this is all just a conversation about workflow and getting them to internalize what that workflow might mean to them. So this is a cyclical iterative flow where the developer is changing code, trying it, see what works. If you've made any changes to the handbook, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you commit a code change, you look at the review app and you see, did my pipeline run? Did it come out like I intended it to? Or is my formatting off, right? That's what developers do very iteratively. So you're showing them the security results as they're iterating through it. What better time to fix it? Now, if they can't fix it, then it goes to, they're going to merge their code in with the main branch, and then it's going to show up on the dashboard, the security dashboard, at the project level, the group level, or the instance level. And by the way, we've added a feature in the last couple months where they can export those results, meaning that those vulnerabilities can be ingested and reported however they would like. If they've got some special way that they like to report it to executives or what have you, they can do that with that export from the dashboard. One other thing, if you're talking about this workflow, a developer and a security person can take a couple of actions. One is to dismiss a vulnerability or to create an issue. If they dismiss a vulnerability, that usually raises the hackles on the back of the neck of the security people. But the key point here is what it does is it strikes a line through it so they don't have to deal with it again, but it doesn't go away. It still shows up for the security person on the dashboard. And in fact, they can filter to see only dismissed items, and lots of them like to do that. So that's important. Now, I recommend using this slide if you're talking to maybe a manager level, maybe even practitioner level. If you're talking with a C-level, use this slide instead. It just says that, we're helping through the entire software development lifecycle. They may get lost on some of that more detailed workflow. But either way, the fact that security is integrated is really what sets us apart, because it's contextual. It's part of the DevOps workflow, that iterative process. It gets the information to the developers who are the ones that can do the remediation and fix those flaws. Couple more slides here that you could go through. This shows a merge request. This is what the developer is going to focus on. So they're going to see these results, the security results in their merge request pipeline. They can drill down. They're going to see remediation advice and more information, and this is where they can take action. And oh, by the way, this very same view is what the security person will see if the vulnerability persists into the dashboard. Security people love to see, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. Help me prioritize. Help me find those things that I need to care the most about. So this A through F risk score is really important to them. You will get a lot of questions on what sets that, what determines what's an A and what's an F, and it has to do with the severity and the number of severities in a particular project. But the idea is, here's the projects that are the worst off that you need to focus on. A lot of them are going to want to customize that. We have an issue open for that. Happy to have them contribute to it. We have suggested solutions for dependencies and for containers. And what that means is sometimes those things can be fixed by patching, pulling down a more recent library. And so we help make that easy for them to do. Bill of materials. This is useful if we just had a 0 day on some dependency and I need to know where all that is used. My bill of materials is going to show me where that dependency might be used. We have a new stage that's been built out called Defend. I don't recommend that you talk about the web application firewall just yet. It's still getting some of the kinks worked out and is small in the number of users. But definitely talk about container network security and container host security. It's very, very timely. So these have to do with people that are using Kubernetes, monitoring the security of those environments. So I mentioned that there's, cloud native brings a whole new set. This was like the second slide, brings a whole new set of attack surfaces. And that's where this comes to play. So containers, orchestrators, microservices, those are the things that are driving the cloud security, and there's not a lot of good solutions out there. So we still have a really good time to get to this market. And you can talk, I don't recommend going into a lot of detail here, but to me, the sweet spot is the cloud network security, because it monitors the east-west traffic, or the traffic between clusters between Kubernetes clusters and containers. So if you've got one container calling another container that shouldn't be, that's probably an exploit. And it's those kinds of things that get found that are often associated with a lateral attack. So somebody finds some low-hanging fruit that gets them in the door into your Kubernetes environment or your containers or your cloud service, and they use this sort of attack to cross into areas that may be more sensitive data that you normally would have protected better, but the Kubernetes piece could be a gap. So why is this important from a DevSecOps standpoint? You're getting real information about real exploits, and you can get that back to the developer. We'll get better at that closed loop over time. But rarely does a developer ever hear that their application had vulnerabilities that were exploited unless they get fired because it was so bad. So, something really good here. And then have your SA go into a demo and make those key points that I covered here. So hope this is helpful for you. Be sure and ask a lot of questions. Make it theirs. Find their biggest pain. Show them how we address their biggest pain. If you have any questions, call me. Always happy to help.